Hey, Link here. Thanks for joining me for episode 114, where I speak with writer and narrative designer Bryant Francis. In this episode, we talk about writing for games, how they got into the industry, words of encouragement, finding his voice, what got him into the industry, favorite games, guilty pleasures, life outside of gaming, and some lightning round questions. Before we get started, don't forget there are links in the episode description that you can follow to learn more about Bryant as well as the podcast. Also, don't forget to like and share the episode, and without further ado, enjoy episode 114. Hi, and welcome to the Red Tunic Podcast, a podcast where I look to rediscover what makes gaming fun and enjoyable by having positive conversations with those related to the industry. My name is Link, and today I'm joined by Bryant Francis, writer and narrative designer on Zephon, and senior editor at Game Developer. Hi, Bryant. How are you doing today?
Hey, Link, thanks for having me. That's such a really nice premise for a podcast, and it's thank you for having me on to discover that same joy that you were talking about.
Well, thank you for your kindness on that. I'm not gonna lie. The premise came about because I, at some point, hit a wall where I was just unhappy with games and figured
Oh,
maybe I should try and fix that. And by talking to devs, people that are in the industry and whatnot, it's a good palate cleanse to remember that there are real people behind making games, behind like the
hmm
choices that are made and whatnot, right? It's not just some like machine churning and spitting things out, as much as sometimes that's all we believe it is. But yeah, like I thank you. I like the premise of the podcast as well, and I'm happy to have
yeah.
you here.
Is it called the Red Tunic Podcast because the red tunic protects you from fire, and so therefore you're trying to keep like the flame bait away? I'm gonna guess that's been on my mind since I started. Here's it. See, the journalist in me is popping up. I'm asking you questions, even though I'm the guest. Haha.
Um, so fun fact, it's twofold because anyone that knows, in Ocarina of Time, the red tunic is what protects against flame, as well as Ocarina of Time and the Link to the Past. The red tunic gave you double the defense. Yes to your question, and yes, more so to your question.
Yeah. Sweet. I got it
um,
right.
you
Gamer
did.
card renewed.
Uh, Honestly, the amount of people that have got that is pretty low, so I'm always happy when someone goes, "Okay, I get this."
hmm
Because trying to make a reference like that and it failing is not always fun.
Oof. Let me tell you, making references and having them fail and no one gets them is just on the writing side, it's like, oof, that's it. That's all the time.
um yeah, understandable and relatable in the sense of the potential blow that hits or takes when you're just like, I thought it was simple. um but
Yeah.
anyway, Brian, you are here for me to bug you about game stuff.
Yeah.
However, before we get started, if you don't mind, could you share a little bit about yourself, kind of like the elevator pitch or the 411 of who you are, the things that you feel people should just know or are the most important for them to know about you before I start bugging you about other questions?
Of course, yeah. So I'm Bryant. Thank you. You already introduced sort of the job title, the most recent game I worked on, yada yada. I came into the game industry after a brief start in kind of the film and TV business. I love writing. I kind of was just looking for. After going through film school, I was sort of realized that like where I was going with my life was just I wanted to be able to take all these stuff that was in my head and get it out on the page in exchange for monies. Um, and film and TV was definitely a good path for that. But then after I happened to meet folks from the IGDA Writers SIG, and I still owe a lot to them because I met them when I visited PAX West in Seattle over a decade ago now. They have a little thing called Right Club that they do mainly at GDC now, I think. Sometimes at PAX West. COVID really threw all that in disarray, but it's just a little like kind of elimination round thing where you just have to respond to several jokey game writing prompts, and I did it, and I was like, wait, I think I could do this for real. And things just kind of escalated from there. It's been God, that was in like 2013, that would have to be. Yeah, geez, that was 12 years ago. It made me feel incredibly lucky, to sort of get an intro to the industry from those super wonderful folks. And since then, I've been lucky to have a very rare, long-lasting career in games journalism. I've gotten to work on a couple strategy games. I think it's always every writer coming into the business faces challenges, and any business really, because of how the market for paid writing has shaken out in the age of the internet. So I feel incredibly lucky to be in this position, and also like, if any of your listeners are ever like, oh, like, how do I get my start in writing? Like, it's going to involve a lot of luck, but like, you also have the ability to sort of carve a path based on opportunity, and that's what I feel lucky enough to have gotten to do for the last 12 years.
So, thank you for sharing that. And I'm gonna ask this because whenever I get the chance, it's always fun to hear, the inner workings of your mind
Mm-hmm.
with this. Uh, for you, is there a difference between writing for like film and TV and games? I know
Yeah.
for other people I've spoken to, like, uh, for them there definitely is, but everyone interprets and works with things differently. So I'm wondering, how does that hold up for you?
Oh, it hugely does. Film and TV, with a disclaimer of my professional experience in film and TV, never quite made it to the writer's room. But plenty of sit downs and screenplays and such. Film and TV is such like, there's just such a specific blueprint for writing that even if you have all these different ways of putting words in the blueprint, which we call, a screenplay, whether it's a writer's room, whether you're working solo and then sending off and getting notes, um, there's just kind of a set process of, I am writing something, I'm essentially writing instructions for someone else in a sense. Like, there's a lot of artistry that goes into that, right? Like, that's not to diminish it, but there's a vessel that then becomes this elegant tool to make a movie with. And in games, the default writing mindset I have for everything is, do words go in game? Then someone has to write them, right? And that goes as cinematically familiar as a game like, as Naughty Dog's output with The Last of Us and Uncharted. And it can even go far more procedural and systemic, which is both what we do on Zephon. It's kind of what the folks up at Kit Fox Games do with the procedural games they make. Whenever someone's like, so what is game writing, or how do you get into games writing? I'm like, you have to start at the fact that in order for a game to have any words or story or narrative, there have to be words, and someone's got to write them. And then from there, you got to sort of like make the case that you're the best one to put them in, and in the way that you think fits them best. That's the dividing line between the two fields, I feel.
So thank you for sharing that. And I like the I like the view that when it comes to like games, that like
Mm-hmm.
like someone has to do it. Like, right?
Yeah.
Um it's just it's sorry, thank you. It's interesting. Sorry, I'm struggling to like try and put it in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Um and like I'm I'm wondering when it comes to uh I'll go with this because I think this will be a better bridge that will lead better to the question I'm trying to ask and help me
Oh,
form it
sure.
out a little more. Um,
Yeah.
but like, you had mentioned because of PAX and you were playing around, playing around it diminishes a little, but you were
It
participating
was a
in
game, yeah, yeah. It was Right Club is a game, so it was a
okay.
playful thing, which we could talk more about, like how play intersects with work in a field like this. But continue, please.
Uh, but I was going to ask, for the steps for that, did at any point you think like games was a thing beforehand? Because I'm making the presumption that you enjoyed games
Oh
before
yeah.
you got into that. So like, was that sort of like a moment where, well, you kind of touched on it, but was there before that a moment of like, I would like to do this, I just don't know how, or like, um, you just didn't see a path forward until that moment? I'm trying to figure out like the a little more robustly maybe of how it is you got into it. Does that
Yeah,
make
right.
sense? I apologize if not.
Oh no, no need to apologize. Right. Well, if you want a perfect case study, right, of like what makes someone, go to an event like that, participate, and then decide that they're, you know, engaged enough to want to do it as a career. My friend Brian was with me at that same right club. Played, did pretty well, and he did not want to be a games writer after that. Even though I think he does have a creative streak that he could have easily followed up on. No, yeah. So I before that I had taken a game writing course in college, but it was kind of like the professor was kind of learning what game writing was at the same time as the rest of us. There was just sort of a sense that, like this would have been graduating in 2012, the Uncharted games were just kind of coming up, like games with my opinion is games with good writing have been around for ages, but games with writing that sort of like made sense to people who aren't playing games was popping off. And my wonderful former professor Elizabeth Nonis took a swing at trying to teach a class, and I had been watching the YouTube show Extra Credits for a while, and that gave me sort of a sense that like, hey, like there's a lot I understand about this field, and there's a lot I think I could do if I took this class. I have a long, maybe like not worth going into detail opinions about my output from that class, which is to say, like, it needs to stay. There are other things from film school that I gladly show people, and everything from that class is like not practical for where I've gone in games. It was a lot of like, this is how you don't do it. But that was like, the seed gets planted somewhere, right? Like when I was also in college, my first ever like piece of game writing was I reviewed Halo Reach for the Ithacan, which is this, an award-winning college publication. And I, rushed to the game and I was like, I don't think I want to ever write about video games ever again. Like this was really hard, like trying to race to review it. And then lo and behold, here I am. God, that would have been 2010. Jesus, 15 years later. Um, Still doing it. So, like the seeds get planted in strange ways, I guess. Like, especially if you have the fundamental ingredients of loving games, loving writing, loving storytelling, like, these you can make it a conscious decision about whether or not you want to do something or you want to walk away from something. And the world can pull you back towards it if you want it to.
So thank you for that. I like that, the idea of planting seeds and, if that's where you're going to end up, you're going to make your way back to there. To
Mm-hmm.
paraphrase what you said, I'm I'm wondering as well, is do you have any like words of encouragement? I know you kind of touched on this a few moments ago, but more explicitly, I'll say, do you have any like words of encouragement for people that might want to uh, go down a similar path, whether that's be a writer, a narrative designer, or like an editor for games journalism or what have you?
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because ro- right now is a very bad time to say like you can do it. Like just excuse me. Right now is a very bad time to just sort of uncritically say like you can do it. You can chase your dreams. You can become the next Neil Druckmann or Jason Schreier or Maddie Myers or Caitlin Tremblay, good friend of mine. Um, uh, um, the encouragement I have is sort of that, like, right now, games journalism, games writing as a career, game development as a career is not in a great spot, and we are probably still contracting with, like, I don't know when or what the bounce back will look like. Um, the encouragement I have for people is always like, look, stare all that in the face and sort of recognize that like it was always in your personal sense going to be uh a uphill climb in one way or another. You sign up for this kind of career because you've looked at the uphill climb and said, screw it, I'm going to do it. Um and what you're really always trying to look for is there that like fire inside you, that like thing struggling to jump out of you that makes you just like start putting stuff out on the page. If you've got that, then everything after that is worth it. Like, you know, it's going to be 10,000 jobs you apply for and get 2 interviews and maybe one of them sticks, and it's worth it. Like, if you have to take a day job while you do all that and you're writing, you know, at home at whatever pace you set, it's worth it. To me, as long as like as that's the thing driving you, it's going to pay off in some form or another. And that's what you say, that's what you try and say to be clear-eyed in a very challenging environment. Because I think my career is an example of someone who, like, I have tried and failed to shoot a little bit higher than my station on many occasions. And in writing, you sort of have to go, whenever, you know, you hit fail or, you know, you sort of get smacked down, you have to go, thank you, sir, may I please have some more? You know, after you go off and have a little cry or something, maybe, at how you missed out on some opportunity. But like, that's the encouragement I give for people, is like, there's something, the reason anyone does this instead of going to like finance is because there's just something that they can't turn off. There's something that like happens naturally. And that's, if you've got that, and not everyone does, and it's okay if you don't. Sometimes people think they've got it and they don't, and it hurts more to try and have it than don't. Yeah, that's where I'm at. It's a challenge to be encouraging this time. I know a lot of people who wouldn't be encouraging, but I'm also sort of like, as someone who dealt with a lot of people who was like, it's not even worth it to go down this road. I dealt with a lot of those people early in my career. Like, I'm very like spitting fire about whenever someone's like, and excuse me, I am aggressively like optimistic, but you try to do it with to not shy people away from how hard it can be.
So thank you for that, and I'm curious because, you know, speaking of the you know, if you have like the fire inside of you, you want to put it
Yeah.
down, and also touching back on like your review of Halo, I'm wondering, you know, with the feeling of Halo, but also having like the feeling that you have something you want to say, like what was it like to find your voice? Like, was there anything specific for you that you finally went, "Oh, this is how I want to approach it," or was it just you kept kind of going, getting past the initial feeling of rushing through Halo to get something out to, you know, be
Mm-hmm.
first to release or what have you, what have you, what have you, um, to like where you were happy with what you were saying and you no longer felt like you were just rushing to try and get something out there? Something that you actually
Oh
was
man,
like, "Hey, I enjoyed this." You know what I mean?
that's a good question. I feel, once again, I have to point to, well, I have to point to luck that put me into, I like stumbled into specific opportunities. You know, one of the big ones being asked to do some freelance coverage for what was then called Gamma Sutra, now Game Developer, at IndieK 2014. Something clicked when I sort of realized that like talking to people who make games, you know, was a pretty, I felt comfortable doing it, even if they worked on games, you know, they were like higher profile, celebrity-ish game developers, whatever. Like it, um, once I just felt comfortable, and I felt comfortable like taking some of the craft ways of thinking that I got from my film education and bringing them to games, right? Like there's still ways I think about my, you know, literally my art history 101 course I took in college, like still rattles in my head. Um, my like lessons about the history of film production were the beginning of how you think about the quiet forces that shape the video game development community. And the more I had opportunities to flex that like line of thinking, the like kind of this just like pushing, you know, to sort of get questions about things that I naturally had, the more my journalistic writing like really, you know, came together. On the narrative side, Zephon has felt like a huge, you know, like things just clicking kind of story. In college, like I sort of, when it came to that was where I sort of ramped up a lot of like how I was doing fiction writing, screenplays and such. Like I sort of learned that that I had a fondness for God, how would I describe it? I had a fondness for like sort of setting up adventure stories with sort of like characters juggling multiple antagonists on all sides. And my friend gave me the biggest compliment about my thesis film, which was congratulations, out of 90% of the out of like all the films in the final thesis screening for our class, yours was like one of the only ones that had a beginning, middle, and end. And it's surprisingly how hard that can be for writers. And so I felt like I cracked some of those like early, but it was, having not had any formal education in journalism, like it had to finding a niche based on interviews was really where like it felt like something I could really do for a job. And then Zephon's been kind of about a little bit more about like letting loose a little bit, like sort of like trying to let my subconscious lead the way on some of the writing. Because if you just sort of try and start too much from what's the tropes or the gameplay expectations, if you start too much from there, you make stuff that's a little flat. And then when you sort of try and like listen to yourself and find that like weird instinct that pops up at you, you look at like a design for a character and you go like, okay, on the surface it's this, but what if like this thing is also jumping out at me? Like, what if I try pitching this? And then it, 3 out of 5 times it works out, and then 2 out of 5, you get sent back to the drawing board and go, no, too weird or not weird enough. Those are kind of the two ends of what I've learned about finding my voice, I think, is learning on the one hand how to sort of lose control, and when it comes to thinking of things to put in a story, and at the other end it's finding a way to turn conversations into something that I can tell someone else about. That's a long, complex answer. I think it's long and complex because I am in 2 disciplines at once, which is challenging. Because you can't just sort of point to one thing. You sort of have to point to 2 tracks that are going alongside each other. They are both connected, but they also, like I was telling someone else the other day, like they sort of don't overlap in specific ways, and it's healthy that they don't.
So thank you for that. I understand what you're saying, especially in the duality is probably the wrong word, but like the fact that they don't exactly run parallel, because like at some point they are going to intersect or bounce off each other,
Mm-hmm.
and like you are going to have those moments where they kind of ebb and flow and cross paths, but they're not overlapped and they're not distinctly running away from each other, because just the nature of writing and trying to like flesh it out or what have you, you're going to have that bouncing off every now and then. But I like
Mm-hmm.
the um I like the I'm gonna paraphrase this, and I apologize if I butcher it, but
No,
like the
yeah.
just letting go, kind of just letting yourself go where you end up with, in terms of like writing writing like a story or like narrative designing something out or what have you. Because like I've read this from other people that are writers as well, that if you're just looking at the standard tropes, you're just looking at the standard archetypes, you're just going to basically write the hero's journey over and over and over again. And at some point, if you are confining yourself to that, you're just going to paint yourself into a corner, or you're going to set yourself up in a box, right? And
Yeah.
you know that's that's not always good for you. That's not always going to be like, well, it might be successful, but it's a matter of like, is it the right choice, or could it have been more successful if maybe just left the lid of the box open, or left a wall down or what have you, right? So
Yeah.
I like the idea of just sort of letting yourself have the freedom to see where you go, and not from the get-go, at the very least, set yourself up to be stuck in a corner, because
Yeah.
uh as free as you want to be, sometimes you accidentally end up in a corner, right?
Oh yeah, and my freedom sometimes you let loose, and then like I said, that's 2 out of 5. I'd reckon I get told, "Hey, rein it in." It's funny. I think like the best technique for this is sometimes like you're trying to build an instinct of how to listen to yourself. Um, I, uh, I have reason. I don't know. Excuse me. I catch myself with often just very like running thoughts, sort of just running and cycling from one thing to another very regularly. I guess I actually know. In order for that sentence to make any sense, like why are we different than anything else? Like I was diagnosed with ADHD in 2023, and that sort of like put a wrapper around like my ways of thinking and my ways of speaking that have been with me all my life, and it helped me realize that like I'm lucky enough to be in a position where like my brain is always turning something over and like literally got a whiteboard across the room here that's just stuff I needed to get out of my head, or otherwise I was going to be turning on it forever. Um, Learning how to listen to that stream, that pool, that like river of stuff going along is a skill. And that's like more than whether or not, like the trope stuff is just like, there's an instinct among other people working in games, like you just keep looking for reference points and easy reference points to like, make something, right? And that's, with all the best intentions, that's how you can get a lot of things that feel pretty samey. And sometimes you need that framework, and then other times, like I said, like you're not desperately, you're trying to hone the skill of letting that river in your head like drift, flow by, so you can grab something out of it that someone else is going to care a lot about. Because that's really like something that we haven't even sort of hit yet in this conversation is, well, why should anyone care about what you're doing? And that goes back to the fire inside, right? Like that thing inside you, some part of you thinks that someone else wants to read it. And after years and years and years, you eventually figure out what those things that people want to read are. And sometimes you have data to back it up, and sometimes you're just winging it.
So thank you for that. I understand everything that you're saying. As someone that is as of this moment trying to figure out their own ADHD assessment,
Yeah.
I can relate and understand um to what you're saying, and like just the awareness of, you know, trying to pull one of those streams down and hope that it takes you somewhere, and learning when to let go and when to try and rein it in, and what have you. I'm sure there's lots of people that have a similar workflow, or a similar workflow is the wrong word, but a similar kind of process, right? So like
Yeah.
thank you for that. I like hearing um the process that people go through, just because uh, as similar as they can be, you're not, you're never going to be the exact same as someone else, whether, it's an execution or what have you. So like, thank you for that. I just always like to hear
Oh
that
yeah.
kind of that workflow, that logic flow, or what have you.
Yeah.
Um, Now, I am Bryant, sorry. I
A
am
cheese sticks in there.
It did, and I apologize there. Um, I am curious, like, was there a game for you when you were younger, when you were older, what have you, that made you, um, that like made you go, hey, this is where I'd like to go. Like you touched on, in the mid 2000s, the 2010s, I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the more appropriate. Like Uncharted coming out, where the general public was becoming more aware of writing for games being this potential powerhouse, where like narrative design in games uh wasn't being something that you would find in, let's say, like a CRPG like Knights of the Old Republic, or something from
Yeah.
Obsidian, or what have you. Um, I'm wondering, was there a game that made you go like, hey, this is something I think I would like to do, whether or not it was the idea of writing or not, I don't know. But like, just was there a game for you that you're like, I'd like to do this? And if so, like, what game was it that kind of made you game, or games that made you want to, consider the industry, or what have you?
Yeah. Great question. I think I'm in an interesting position where there was no one game that made me go, I want to be a games writer. I there were a lot of things I loved about games that when I learned, that you could be a writer in them, that I was like, oh, well, these all things seem like things I could do. I'm gonna work backward in time real fast with some quick stop offs. The first game that I thought about, I would say, or no, that's not true. Not the first game. A very meaningful game that I thought about as I was like finishing up school in 2012 was Supergiant Games Bastion. I actually probably played it in late 2011 now that I think about it. Or I might be wrong. Yeah, 2011, 2012, I had played Supergiant Games Bastion, and that game just struck such a chord top to bottom about not just how it told the story with, the narrator describing everything the player is doing, which is, such a smart, interesting gimmick. Not just smart and interesting in its oath, but what the narrator says too, right? Like that specific story. But that one hit home really hard, and that was kind of like coming, at a point where I was just about to leave school and start trying to make a career as a writer. Like that one definitely like stuck in my head. Going back in time, we're gonna stop on Tales of Symphonia really fast. From God, I forget who makes the Tales games, but Tales of Symphonia was a JRPG that like I think playing Clair Obscur at Expedition 33 right now is the closest I felt to having that experience of like, oh my god, like this game that I thought I knew what it was kind of all about is delivering something even bigger. Dang it. Sorry about that. Tales of Symphonia, very much was one of the moments where I was like, wait, video game stories are bigger than what I thought they were. But then a moment where I didn't realize that, but the more I think back and look on it as like one of the games that I played when I was younger that had a big impact on me from the writing side was Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, which is often overlooked compared to Final Fantasy Tactics, which Tactics has this political and political storyline that also is about, like how religion infects the policy of state and war. But then Final Fantasy Tactics Advance opens with kids having a snowball fight and then getting sucked into the world of Ivalice and trying to find their way home. But then the biggest antagonist in the game is your friend who doesn't want to go home because home sucks. I have never seen anything like that since then, which is both like, I don't know, it's not that, I don't want to put this game on too big a pedestal because the only game I really think belongs on a pedestal might be 1000 X Persists from last year. But Tactics Advance was a very unusual story to put in front of, like the primarily young audience playing games on the Game Boy Advance. Because it's a story about, what is now today the modern isekai genre, right? Like you wake up in another world. And it's very like, yeah, you're here. There's tons of cool things to do. It's a great adventure, but you need to go home. And not in a you owe something to your family, you owe something to your world kind of way, but there's something you owe to yourself about going home. You can't just like live in a dream forever. That's big. And I remember playing at the time and not necessarily, I was too young to know, how big it was. But if I look back at like all, like the early game stories that I encountered that made me like really care about the genre, Tactics Advance just ranks really high.
So, thank you for sharing that. And far be it from me to ever shun anyone for picking what games belong on their pedestal, and I'm not saying that, I'm not leading into that to like be like, yeah, because that game sucks. No, Final Fantasy Tactics Advance is a fantastic game. I played the hell out of it. I don't think I really what's the right word? Consumed the story as much. Or at the very least, I'm not remembering because like I played it on the bus to and from school, and it was like that's just one of the games I went through for that. So like but far be it from me, but like I can understand because you're right. It hilariously is kind of like a predecessor to isekai stuff before, contentious or not, isekai just became slop.
I don't disagree.
I have opinions. I'm not afraid to stand on the hill for that one.
It's
But
oh
like,
man, we gotta avoid being derailed because I agree, but I'm also like the stakes are low. Like Isekai is slop. Also, it's fine. Let it be slop.
like, look, to a degree, yes. Let it be slop. Let it be easy junk food. I'm not gonna dunk on anyone enjoying junk food. I enjoy junk food. I'll go out of my way to enjoy junk food. So like when I say it's slop, I don't mean the junk food stuff is slop because like it is what it is, but there's a lot of isekai and it's a lot a lot of it's I the most contentious thing I'll say is I absolutely despise Sword Art Online because
Oh, me
it's
too.
oh fantastic. I don't we're not gonna have to argue.
Yeah,
Not that I would, but but like
I,
far
I
be
was
it
only
for
gonna
me to
say
oh,
I only
sorry.
wanted to springboard off that briefly because this is an interesting discussion to try and have when you're in creative space. This is like I think having taste is really important. And taste is a weird word because the AI crowd has co-opted it to be like, ooh, it will only be taste that matters once the techniques have been solved. I'm like, no, no, get away. No, stop it. Just spraying them with a little bottle. Um, but the duality you face in writing of all stripes is you need to have a super critical brain to get any of it done, especially be able to critically assess your own work. And also, you need to find a line when talking with your peers about any of this work, like why. And I think sometimes there's two problems you can get stuck in. And weirdly, this relates to the premise of your podcast, not in a bad way, just like the very thing you're trying to explore. How do we feel about games and art? Like on the one hand, and the YouTuber world has unfortunately inked us, whereas the first language you learn about criticism is like, I don't like this, because it feels such an aberration to the norm you have, which is liking the things put in front of you. Um, and then it's real easy to identify things you don't like and find patterns. And I don't blame people for having that instinct. But God, I literally was in a conversation, among professional game developers, and suddenly someone jumped off, sort of talking smack about the recent Halo games from 343 as opposed to those made by Bungie. And I sort of had to put a pause and go, hey, like, no one here works at 343. But there are people who work at other AAA studios. Now imagine if you'd said something about a game they worked on, you didn't know it, and they went, oh no, like, I'm sorry. And I'm like, no, it's good. Like, I'm not bothered by it. Like, you should criticize Halo all you want, but like, the language of criticism and being able to identify what is or isn't uh, a thing you actually feel is it's a skill that's part of the field, I think, right? Like I think it's a challenge of you need to be able to say like, yeah, I think a lot of isekai is slop. Um and then when you're talking to someone who works on isekai stuff, they might go, why? And then the next step is being able to not even just be constructive about it, but to sort of like express what, again, this is what a lot of people get into criticism for, is to express what's that thing beating inside you that has to get out, which is some version of, my God, if I have to see another anime where this 18-year-old kid gets resurrected in something and now all the women are fawning over him and he gets to like power level to 100, like, my God, it just keeps coming and it just is so like self-serving that it doesn't feel good to watch anymore. Like that's kind of the needle you have to thread when talking about art broadly, is especially we sort of, like we said up top, like you have a podcast here called Red Tunic. You did this because you were feeling upset about games, and yet there it is such a like, sometimes you have to both stand your ground about like, no, I am like tired of all this isekai, and also you need to not do it in a way that like just straight up insults people who either like isekai or work on isekai things. Hasn't really penetrated the Western game genre audience that much, I'll say. I'm not as familiar with the light novel world, and if isekai has crept into games there. Tactics Advance really is just like pre overproduced isekai.
Yes, and I understand completely everything that you're saying, and that's part of why I say like, a lot of it is just like junk food, and like if you enjoy it, by all means, enjoy the hell out of it. Like, far be it from me to ever shun anyone for
Yeah,
enjoying a crazy power fantasy, because some of them are just hilarious and crazy power fantasies, by all means,
and there are
and
good
like
ones out there. So you're not,
yes, 100%. But like you said, being able to like, you kind of touched on one of the things that I don't enjoy, or why I'm tired of. The amount of it is like the whole harem thing, kind of what have you, what have you.
Yeah,
And like, you know, and that's, I grew up watching anime through the 2000s. So like
yeah.
I'm aware of the harem phase, and isekai stuff has kind of touched back into it. And like I wasn't a fan of the harem phase then, mainly because it was just exhausting. Um and you know, it's just when you're so inundated with like, so much of it, it's easy to, burnt out is the wrong word, but like it's easy to be like, I don't need this anymore. There's like 12 series that are, you know, arguably the same thing, but minor differences, right? So like personally me, I'm not going to shun anyone that enjoys them, just like I'm not going to shun anyone that
Mhm.
enjoys the whole harem era. Like if you like all of that and everything that came of it, by all means. If you only liked a few of them, by all means. I've liked a few of them. I've liked a few isekai things as well. Um, but like I'm just tired of navigating the pool of it.
Yeah.
However, I will always stand on that sword art. It's a
Oh, yeah.
very special kind of annoyance for me.
It's because
Um,
it's so dang popular. I go to conventions and I see all the cosplay, and I'm like, why do you all hate yourselves? This
well,
this
for
show
me,
talks down to you.
I stopped watching it before it might have got to that point, but I think I'll save that opinion or what have you for off the mic, just because it's kind of like you touched on. It doesn't exactly have a place here. Um,
Term
but
to your spin-off podcast, um Blue Tunic. I don't know what this has to do with the Blue Tunics from Zelda, but just Blue Tunic, where we discuss anime. Where you discuss anime.
um, I I don't watch enough anymore to go down that path. But yeah, yeah. But I like what you were saying about like just the games that you listed, how they like kind of show, or they refocused or showed you like what kind of like directions narrative focused things could be. Like Bastion, for
Hmm.
example. I distinctly remember like the voice that Bastion had and the
Yeah,
way that it handled narration from the narrator, basically just like narrating everything
yeah,
that you're doing, but also dealing with the story unfolding from the everything that you were playing, but what have you. But no, thank you for that. I understand like where you were going with that, and like yeah, it's fantastic, fantastic, in my opinion, fantastic example.
yeah,
um
yeah. It's funny, God, you said a harem phase in there, and I just started thinking about a strategy game. What if a strategy game had a harem phase? You know, like there's the regroup phase, the maintenance phase, some kind of RPG harem phase. I don't have it yet, but I'll get back to you.
oh, there's several harem phase RPGs.
Oh wait, you're right. Yeah.
There's several. Like not to say this too heavily about Fire Emblem, but you could
Yeah.
play it like that. But
Oh
again,
my
not
God, yeah, you
that's
could. The support system is just harem phase. Oh my God.
um you but that's the wrong example. But like I am struggling to think of the game series right now. Um but there's one where it played kind of like a social link persona dungeon crawler where you harem phase social link demons out of girls. There's a whole bunch. I don't think it's worth going down that path, but
Oh
they
boy,
they, they,
yeah.
they exist. They definitely exist. Um, the Most of them were on the Vita. That was like the right place for the Vita for all of those games to come out, because they were easy to spin off and cheaper to produce. Maybe. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know, but anyway, I am I am curious about this one. Um, do you actually have like a favorite game or favorite games? You spoke highly of Bastion, of Final Fantasy Tactics, the Tales game, of you put on the pedestal. I always forget the 1000x resist
One
or what
thousand
have
X
you.
resist. Yeah,
um it's the number that screws with my head always.
yeah.
um but like, do you have a favorite game or favorite games, and if so, like what is it that makes that game or those games so special to you?
Yeah, Bastion holds the honorary title of my favorite video game, right? Like if someone especially out of the blue goes, "What's your favorite video game?" I'll just go Bastion. For a number of reasons, like it earnestly is like there's kind of a feeling that you have when you realize you love something so much that like it is going to stick with you in a way that like I think will means it's worthy of the title of your favorite game. I As I've gotten older, I've actually sort of realized like it's very difficult for me to say what my favorite of anything is. Like I am a huge Star Wars freak. I have favorite I have favorite things in Star Wars. I have favorite like movie lists, whatever. Like, but Star Wars is not my favorite movie. Unless you catch me on the right day, and I'll say that Star Wars: The Last Jedi is my favorite movie. But even then, like even when I'm saying that, I like kind of don't fully mean it because there are other movies out there that um can mean a lot to me and mean as much to me. But to say any of them is my favorite, I've just sort of realized like I don't see it that way. Like I don't see it as a favorite. In games especially, like every year, I think being in journalism, like a little bit more than developers, like I try out a lot of interesting games, and eventually having to pick a top 10 for the year like we do on game developers sometimes tricky because you got to knock some really good ones off the list. um and just every year like I find something that was just blow away, like worth every minute I spent playing with it. Like something always blows me away every year, and if you ask me to like rate it any higher than like Tales of Symphonia, like I'd have a hard time doing it. And therefore like I think that might be one of the ways. Maybe it has to do with a career where you talk to people who make games and you sort of begin to understand, appreciate not just the different ways that games can work, but also how they can make you feel. That you just hit a point where you're like, I can't pick a favorite because sometimes I can't judge these against each other. Is I guess like I think that is a difference between me and a lot of folks on the consumer side of the field. Because I'm on the B2B side, and writing for people in the trade is different than writing for people in the public, and uh, that might be one of the things that like really different. It's not necessarily an input for what makes you different, but it's definitely an output, right? Like just the something that happens after you start doing it is you stop thinking about what your favorite game is.
So thank you, and I un- I understand the annoyance of that question because, like you touched
Oh, it's
on,
not annoying. It's not annoying. I think it's
well,
interesting, actually.
um, okay, sorry, annoyance is probably the wrong word there, but like I understand the challenge of that question because it's such a nuanced take, right? And
Yeah,
like I knowingly ask it and know that it's incredibly nuanced because of the reasons you touched on, right?
yeah,
Like even myself, if I was, asked what's your favorite game, it'd be like, well, in what context, right?
yeah.
Um, and like, do you want like the pedestal game? Do you want the nostalgia game? Do you want the Ratatouille game? Do you want the junk food game? Right? Like, and then also for you, you also have to weigh the writing about games opinion of it, which um, I personally, I don't even like to think about a game of the year, right? Because it's such a
Yeah.
um, it's such like a not fun thing to do because like you said, you have to find you're nitpicking on what you're knocking off, but then also if you're primarily going through a backlog, you might have only played like 2 games that came out that year, and it's like, well, that's, in like the spirit of the question is betrayed when you knock off all the other games you played, right? Um,
Or you played a great game at the start of the year, and then it's how great it was like isn't sticking in your head because you just finished like Indiana Jones late last year or something.
yes, exactly that as well. So like, um, so yeah, no, I completely understand the nuance and I appreciate
Yeah.
the way you approached answering it because yeah, it's not an easy question and it's kind of a dirty question because like it just the nuance of it makes it
Yeah.
not as clean or clear.
I'm told like people with ADHD tend to be hyper literal, and sometimes that is incredibly like, but literal like you hear literal and you think like Drax the Destroyer from the Guardians of the Galaxy films, saying like nothing can go over my head, my reflexes are too fast. But sometimes literal is like hey, what's your favorite game? And I'm like, I couldn't definitively tell you what my favorite game is. And the other person's just sitting there going like, I don't need your whole ranking system, man. I just need you to tell me what you really like. And I think maybe that's just the loop in my head that I'm stuck with. Which, I've learning to live with that loop is, like I said, it's a surprising process as I've reached this point in my life and career.
Yes, I understand what you're saying, and um, years ago, I learned to just recontextualize the question. Is how I got around things like that instead of
Yeah,
taking things, unintentionally too literal, like your favorite game. Even years ago, it was like, well, in what context? Like,
yeah,
how are you approaching this, right?
yeah,
So yeah, no, but thank you. I appreciate your answer for that. I appreciate your approach to helping, explain explain all of that.
yeah,
Um Now I'm curious about this one because I think this is a potentially a fun follow-up after all said and done about, touching on games like Tales of Symphonia or Final Fantasy Tactics or Bastion or what have you.
yeah.
Um but like, did you have a game that you enjoyed as a child and looking back on it now, you probably wouldn't enjoy it, or it was kind of like a guilty pleasure, or what have you. I hope that makes sense when I'm asking.
Interesting. God, yeah, it's interesting because you could just sort of go like, "Oh man, I loved these games when I was a kid," and then you go back, like, I honestly, like, I've tried playing some like Game Boy Advance games again. That again, I love the Game Boy Advance as a kid. I didn't go back to Tactics Advance, but I went back to some other ones, and I'm like, I'm actually like playing this, especially on this small device that my hands hurt while playing it because I got big hands now. Um, uh, God, I'm gonna like I'll tip my cards a little here in a way that maybe like I'm just embarrassed by. So I played the first Witcher game when I was in late high school. I played essentially the first version they sold in America because now the version they sell, it's not the same version, right? Like they made a lot of improvements, but the biggest one was they got rid of the playing cards that whenever Geralt, would have like would meet a woman and have sex. Jesus Christ, it sounds so clinical, but like I don't know. And then the game, it wouldn't show you like a sex scene necessarily, but then you would get these naughty playing cards that then you could go look at. And if I'm being fully honest with the answer to your question is I really liked that when I was a teenager, and now I look back and I go, this is gross. They were right to send it away. It was cheeky, right? Like I'm not gonna like I don't know. I'm not gonna especially with how wonderful CD Projekt Red has evolved as a studio over the years. Like I'm not gonna condemn them anything over, but it's like no, this doesn't belong here. Like I I am a defender of devs exploring sex and sexuality in their games, and I think there are ways there's like kind of a spectrum of unexplored stuff in that sense um across not just sort of the AAA space, but even like more ordinary spaces. God, there was a game like the people who made Cairn made a game a couple of years ago that I'm forgetting the name of, but it was one of those like we're gonna make this adventure game. There's like kind of action, like string combos together the game, and then in between everything is a romance between two of your characters, and it's all more intimate and playful, and like that's a really cool thing to see. But yeah, going back to the playing cards, like that's not it, fam. Like those playing cards, like I think they replaced them with like the women still in like pinup poses, but they were clothed, which doesn't supplant the weirdness of the original collectible like women thing, but it at least was kind of this like, hey, we overshot on this. I don't know. Yeah, that's the best example of like things that didn't age well, or I have different opinions about now than I did back then. I'll let that more embarrassing example slip out.
So thank you for that. And like, you bring up an interesting like point with that, and I don't know if I'm missing um if I'm off center with this one, because I'm not gonna lie, I never played The Witcher. I've actually had a hard time getting into The Witcher for
Mm-hmm.
various reasons. Usually I sit down, I'm like, I'm gonna get some mods, and then it's like this, any of the Elder Scroll games where like I spent 40 hours getting mods. I am good. Um it like one of those kind of scenarios. But um I missed that. But however, it almost sounds like it um, it turned them into like a collectible for the sake of like just for you going, I did the collection thing, right? Like the best relatable thing in my mind for that, and in the defense of um Atlas for this, they did fix this, or they adjusted around it. In like the earlier Persona games, you could do uh, not friends social links, romantic social
Yeah,
links, what have you, with everyone, and there was no repercussion. It was, it was you could just do it, and it was a weird. Um, it was weird because it was kind of like you're turning things into a collectible thing. Like you're collecting bed notches, similar to The Witcher,
yeah.
right? And now when you try that, you get shamed for it because you shouldn't be trying to game the system like that. For a game series that's kind of talking about the social interactions and like vulnerabilities and how your characters intersect and everything, right? So
Yeah,
like I to me, what you were saying is kind of in like the same vein as them course correcting in their own way, because like the nuance of it is always different and the importance and what have you, what have you. But it kind of feels like they saw that and were like, not we should kind of like adjust and make this a little more palatable for maybe their own senses after they released it went,
yeah.
maybe we took a step too far or what have you, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I'd say it's like I think I only want to clarify one thing, which is like it's a little bit less that like you could, have sexual relationships with multiple characters, and it was more about the characters in question like just were kind of offered up on a buffet plate for Geralt the player to have sex with. Like or Anita Sarkeesian, listed this in one of her classic, videos about um sexism in video game design. And it's interesting because like I don't think The Witcher has changed that much in terms of like Geralt wanders the world across the games and is meets wonderful women and sometimes bids them, sometimes doesn't. I think they've done their main evolution they've done since then is that all the minus like um minus whenever you wander into a brothel and spend time with sex workers is like they just put a lot more effort into the story. They make more of the interactions like part of the bigger tale. And the first Witcher did not treat it that way. That was definitely not that's how that system worked. And that's kind of the you can again like whatever opinions you have about this, but like Baldur's Gate 3, right? Baldur's Gate 3 won huge praise for all kinds of things, writing, design. Like it's also a game where you can romance multiple characters, and sometimes there are consequences. As sometimes the characters go, I'm cool with it," and like that's the stronger tack than firmly planting a flag in any one particular way of doing relationships in games. It's like sort of the way both of those series, both Baldur's Gate and The Witcher evolved on that front. Just showed that there were so many more interesting ways to do than just to sort of like tease and tantalize like a presumably male audience. Yeah, man, when I got started in like writing about video games, like 2012-ish, pre-Gamergate, Anita Sarkeesian and her videos were just like something everyone on the internet had an opinion about. And even though I don't write as much about the topic now, then it was just such an easy thing to sort of start forming criticism, critical thinking about. Um, and Anita like really like moved something forward there for a lot of writers and critics in a way that like I hope people give her credit for in that sense, because even though like it's frustrating that era can be sort of boiled down to like the hate campaign that followed instead of like her somehow cracking through the public consciousness about this topic in a way that both was like, hey, it wasn't just like, ew, video games, like roll your eyes and walk away. It was, hey, video games can be cool. Why are they also like this? And why are they like this? Is like valid question even today. Like just broadly, like why are they like this? Me playing Claire Obscure, like pairing, parrying and pairing. Why are they like this? Uh, yeah, that's kind of the broader nuance that I think I'd want to apply to the Witcher thing. Is it's not just about I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot of nuance to wiggle in there, and sort of just admitting that when I was 17, like that I was the person being, you know, tantalized by the very game. Like, they assumed I was the target player, and they were right at the time.
So like
Sometimes you gotta own up to it.
So you say something that's I think is really interesting, and it's something that has we said a bunch of things that are really interesting. However, all of it as a whole, it
Appreciate
kind of
that.
goes back to the um the 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 idea that sex sells in some way, shape, or form, right? Like if
Yeah.
we look back to Tomb Raider when that first came out,
Hmm.
like there were all these rumored codes about making Laura Croft naked.
Yeah.
She was a pinup girl. I think she was like a pinup girl for Hustler, for Playboy, for one of those or something like that.
Yeah, they
But
did
like
that as a marketing gimmick at some point. Yeah.
she was the start of sex sells in terms of video games, right? Which, anyone that looks back
Not the
on it
start.
now is a
Not the
sorry?
start, sadly.
Oh, you're
Not the
correct. You are
start.
not you're right. You're not the start. However,
A
um,
prominent pop culture moment is how I would categorize it.
thank you. That is yes, that is the better way to put it. However, like looking back on that, it's hilarious. It's like, really? But anyway, but like I think acknowledging that 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 kind of stuff existed and like finding ways to move away from it, um, just like the general sexism as a whole is an important thing. Not to like try and dive in on any specific point of what you said, because as a whole, just it's a very interesting topic that the more it is addressed in ways that help break it down and I'm trying to think of the right way to phrase all of these things.
Hmm.
Um, but no, it's a good thing to like acknowledge and talk about because like, you know, and this goes both ways, not to like try and stand on the line when I say this, but like just the that games don't have to be about objectification, right?
Yeah.
Like that is an important thing to talk about. And like you're right to give credit where credit is due about the things that helped break down those walls and helped bring it into the social zeitgeist of like importance and things to talk about um just as a whole. Sorry, I'm trying my best because I that's a whole topic that I'm
It's a whole topic. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
like, but no, thank you. That all like everything you said, very interesting, good, very and like good
Yeah.
points, and what have you. But just time and place, and I don't think we have three
Yeah.
hours to try and dive into this. And I'm also not the most, I don't want to say the most educated, but I'm not the most up to date or the best person to even
Yeah.
try and have that conversation.
Yeah. And God, like, for a while, and this is a fair criticism of or excuse me, for a while it seemed like that was kind of the only pitch you could get out there, was if you were sort of like reacting to, if not Anita Sarkeesian, Sarkeesian herself, then any, of the reactions to the reactions to the reactions. Like, in some way, for like a few months there, it felt like all writing orbited around this in a way that like it's not hers or anyone's fault, but it sort of showed how much power, weirdly, we keep looping back to what we talked about at the top of the podcast, which is like, a culture of anger and negativity around games. Um, uh, the the things that really kept it in the zeitgeist, as Gamergate, as a hate movement evolved around that time, were just how vicious the backlash was, right? Like, it's sort of one of the, I don't know. That's sort of unfortunate about the whole topic, is like, whatever you can say about it, like, the pressure applied by that nastiness, and that nastiness, which, in some way or shape or form is present back in those cards in The Witcher 3. A version of it, feeling entitled to it at very least, to games that have those card systems. It sits in all kinds of things, right? Like, in film history, you have this like tension between, like, you have, an exploitation era of films that just ruthless producers going like, yeah, sex sells, but like, gotta get our 5 seconds of this in. But then, like, the genre becomes its own, exploitation films become their own like genre and fascinating thing to study, and things that influence other people with art. And it's tension between all these things, I think, and the tension is what makes it hard to talk about.
Yes, exactly. Yes, I understand what you're saying, and I agree, and yeah, yes. Sorry, not to. It's it's hard to it's hard to agree and not engage, or what have you, right? Um,
Yeah, we
however,
all got opinions.
yeah. Uh, however, Bryant, I think the easy way to not dismiss but not engage is I don't want
To
to steal
move
a whole
on.
lot more of your time, and it's an a cheat way to move on or what have you. However, I would be remiss if I did not at least ask you about who you are outside of games. Like, what do you enjoy doing? What do you do to relax? And if the answer is games, perfectly valid, as all things are. However, I like to ask that just in the event that, there are things that make up you that aren't games and are things you are, want to share or are passionate about or what have you.
Yeah. I'll rapid fire three things, which is one, I've gotten really into miniature painting since getting into sort of tabletop board gaming, which is games adjacent. So I sort of don't. It's a huge part of my hobbies, and also it's just games in tabletop form. Like I think about it the same way I think about roguelikes and stuff. So it's more games on that front. But the mini painting itself part, I've been surprised at how my paintings evolved to the point that now I like, you know, to paint some units recently. I like poured resin and I painted an undercoat for a beach, and then I poured resin and manipulated the resin. I'm like, what am I doing? I never thought I would be messing with resin. Yeah, I love tabletop mini painting now. I do it for my Star Wars games. Like my friends will ask, "Hey, can you paint a mini for me?" And now I'm a person who's like, "Hell yeah!" or dive all the way in. Um, I also have discovered as I've gotten older that I love going to the gym, and this is now an exercise where I'm like, wait, what the heck? Like I thought when I was younger, like I would, hate the gym, hate gym culture, and like I'm not gonna like defend gym culture or anything here. But when you're in the gym and you've learned, I took classes to learn like the best ways to be in the gym and like how to like program exercises for yourself that feel good and like protect your health and stuff. I've gotten really into that, and I try to make sure for a number of reasons that I'm in there regularly, and I now have opinions about gym things, which always, also surprises me. And then the third and final thing, sadly, is like this does not help me relax at all, but I have been super into politics, and especially the politics of watching the far right since I was in high school. Coming up in the United States in the Iraq War era, just like something clicked, and I'm stuck with it. I'm cursed. I like just have I read political news as heavily as I read video game news and entertainment news. And I'm stuck with it. It's cursed. My brain is poisoned. Carly, my spouse, my wonderful spouse Carly, was recently casually mentioned something about like some low level definitely anti-Semitic nonsense that crossed by on a Facebook page they manage, and I was like, oh no, that's tied to this and this thing, and like kind of how the far right talks. And Carly just looked at me like I grew two heads, and they're like, how do you know that? And I'm like, well, my main source to that world is a podcast called Knowledge Fight, where two comedians just dunk on Alex Jones. Oh, it's wonderful. I I think I can. I want like if I were to kind of close on that one, it's that um, when you tell hero stories a lot, and I do, like a lot of my writing anywhere around it, in some way, there's just like I both loathe the hero's journey and like, look, I'm like following a long tradition of adventure writers, like fantasy writers, genre writers. Like I'm not, over here writing slice of life or anything like that, right? Um, you can practically look at it as like I consider the viewpoints of this ideology like um harmful and toxic, not just to other people but to the people who follow them, which is really sad. Sometimes, right, you're just like, geez, man, like um if I were to I'm on a ramble and I need to let the ramble go for a second, but like there was the backlash to the one character in God of War, the giantess whose name I'm forgetting, God of War Ragnarok, and I played this scene with her, and I'm like, man, you guys got so mad that they made a giantess black in a Norse mythology, which is also totally possible given how far Norse culture spread, or the Norse themselves visited, maybe is more accurate. But one Angerboda, that's her name. You guys so mad about Angerboda that you missed one of the most profound levels and most jaw-dropping things in a AAA video game in a hot minute, and you guys just like tortured yourselves out of that. Is definitely like part of how it's what like keeps me watching it, right? Is sort of an interest in a specific kind of um, evil. I do find the far right broadly evil, and maybe some of your listeners will take some umbrage with that, but that's where I'm at, man. Cards on the table. And that's part of it, is that it certainly shapes my stories, and there's just another part of it that like um there's just something that's hard to put my words on why I keep have paid interest on it. Maybe it's just something to do with the fact that like um the impulses feel so close at hand, like the impulse to lash out, to blame someone else, to come up in that culture in specific ways in America in the Iraq War, to be on gamer forums early on, and certainly not like every gamer forum was a right wing rage, but like like the basic conspiracism of like, oh, the devs hate my paladin class in World of Warcraft, and that's why we aren't getting any buffs, stuff like that. Like is the begin for some people, it's the seeds of the beginning of their path to to listening to Alex Jones, or these days it might be Asmongold, it might be Ben Shapiro, Steven Crowder, like any of these goons. And maybe it's because I just like have that little bit of seeing something in there in me, and like maybe I just walk up to that and hold my hand up to the fire a little bit and like feel the heat come on a little too strong. I don't know. I'm getting a little. If you're trying to like ever crack into my psyche, like understand that like I spend way too much time thinking about this, and like have taken an interest in it in all ways outside of work, and occasionally I get to write about it on Game Developer or inject some of it into a game like Zephon. But like, man, like I have cared about politics in my life so much that it's ridiculous. So yeah, that's a long answer to your question. Thank you for letting me ramble there.
So no, yes, you're welcome. You're welcome. um, I understand everything that you were saying. I can relate to the same thing that you had with your partner, where something offhand gets mentioned, you're like, oh, here's the web, right?
Yeah,
Um,
here's the
but
internet.
yeah, but also like here, I if anyone that's listening hears this and they think to themselves, oh, screw this, I'm done. I would feel very bad if they did not look at the people I have sought out to talk with, that I have sought out to have very specific and explicit conversations with, and the
Mm-hmm.
topics that are sometimes covered or intentionally covered or walked into and explored. So if people quit listening because of what you just said, I don't care. Um just to be very, very real and upfront, whatever.
They hold
They
they
miss
hold their
they missed
listening
the
as a
mark.
they hold their listening power. Those folks sometimes hold their listening power as a bargaining chip, right? It's one of the things they say, like there shouldn't be politics in the games, with the under threat of, hey, if you keep putting this stuff in my games, you keep talking about it, like I won't listen to you anymore. And that just sort of speaks to the transactional, like the belief that like one person's individual like choices to listen or not, or to take umbrage with that or not, it works against, it's again the very premise that we talked about, like why do we like games, why do we like art, why do we like anything. It's sometimes when you're when you open yourself up to all this, you find out all kinds of things you either didn't know about the world or yourself. And when but the flip side of the coin is that yeah, there are some times when I too will go, nah, I don't like this, I'm not gonna engage with something that has this anymore. But maybe those things are just a little like more incidental and a little bit less like I'm about less have to do with it, about about how we relate to each other. And maybe that's what the difference is. I don't know. Maybe I'm being a hypocrite for taking umbrage with anyone who just walks away. I don't know. But then I don't listen. Huh. I don't know. Anyway, I've listened to more Alex Jones than most people who claim to like Alex Jones have, and that's what's sad. That's the sad part, is I've listened to by now hundreds of hours of Alex Jones by proxy of Knowledge Fight, and I'm just like brain poisoned by it.
Um, you know, I think the easiest or the best way to say it is, people are complex. We're messy with what we believe.
Yeah.
We're messy with the actions, the choices that we make. So like, Like,
Yeah,
not to dismiss or what have you, what you all just said, just people are messy, and we're allowed to be messy with complex and
yeah,
nuanced opinions and takes, and how we choose to interact or not interact with things, right?
yeah. I agree.
Now, Brian, with that said, as I, before before I asked about what you do outside of games, I did mention that, I wanted to help you work towards the door so that you can have your, get some more of your eating. But before that, I did want to hit you up with some lightning, with
Do
the
it.
lighthearted lightning round. Now, these questions are nonsensical. They're a little random. Um, they're
Oh
also
yeah.
meant to be, quick, no judgment, random things that you can answer however you see fit. Is that okay with you?
Be careful what you promise. Be careful
Well,
what you might unleash something there, buddy.
with that in mind, I'm gonna hit you with some of the ones that, as much as I worry about abusing these ones, I'm gonna do it anyway now for you. Um, which video game character do you think is most likely to put orange juice over their cereal?
Roach, the horse from the Witcher games.
Would you care to elaborate on that?
No. To quote
Fair
David
enough.
Lynch, no.
Fair enough. Um, which video game character do you feel is most likely to call themselves a thirst trap despite having no business doing so, and why?
Oh, if I was being a jerk, I would just keep answering Roach. I'm not going to do that. God, most likely to call themselves a thirst trap. Um, God, Ganondorf.
Fair enough. I look, I don't want to argue with you. However, there's a lot of the
Do it.
fandom that will very much disagree with that, just based on
No,
fan art alone.
no, 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 no. I know this. I sort of know this. Let me put it this way. I know this. Uh, I know this. I'm gonna. This is lightning round, so I'm not gonna dive deep into defending my explanations. But Ganondorf is
Fair
my
enough.
answer to the question.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Um, and for the final one, I'm gonna hit you with which video game character do you feel is most likely to text a picture of their feet at 2 a.m. and ask, "Do these look the same size to you?"
Oh, God, Shadowheart from Baldur's Gate 3.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So, Bryant, thank you very much. That was the lightning round. I was hoping I would hit you with a little more shock and awe with them. However, is what it is. But
Gotta.
thank
I'm
you.
always ready. I'm always. My gun. My hands on over my holster all the time.
Unfortunately for me, yes, you were ready to take them in stride.
Yeah.
Um, now, with all that said, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. However, if there was anything else you did want to discuss, a cool game, what you're doing, something you feel more people should just be more aware of, by all means, the floor is yours. As well, please let everyone know where they can find more information about you, which I'll also include in the episode description.
Yeah. I will go real fast. If you're listening, thank you for sticking to the end here. You can find me on Blue Sky at bryantfrancis.me. Uh, um, you should keep your eyes on the Steam page for Zephon because we released our first DLC a little while back, shortly after the game launched, and there's more DLC on the way, and I cannot wait to show you guys what we're doing there. Otherwise, I think I'll simply close on the message of like, games are worth it, art is worth it, people are worth it, and whatever hard times roll through, like a little bit of the ones we're in right now, like, um, it's worth it to. I believe firmly that it is worth it to brace yourself and deal with the roiling seas and stick with it, uh, even when it seems hard. And if you need to take a break from it for whatever reason, whether it's just playing games, working in games, doing art, um, taking a break from the news, whatever, that's also okay. Um, the things that make all this worth it are bigger than any of the people or forces who are making things hard right now, and uh, it is all worth it. Is my closing message.
So, Brian, thank you so much. And I think that is a wonderful place to leave us on. So, if there wasn't anything else, I'll let you get on with your day.
Thank you for having me.
So, thanks again to Bryant for making this time to have this conversation with me. And thank you for joining us on the Red Tunic podcast, as well as a special thanks to Roland Jankeys for the use of music from the title track from Road Steep. And be sure to check out the episode description for links to socials, websites, and other means that will allow you to learn more about or support Bryant and the podcast. And while you're doing that, share, like, follow, whatever else you think makes the algorithm work. Thanks. Till next time.